Imagine the scene for a moment. It's New York City. We're talking Lower Manhattan, and it's the dead of night, specifically 3:00 a.m. on November 30th, 1989.
Right.
Now, usually when we get into this topic, UFOs, high strangeness, the unexplainable, we are picturing something very different. We're picturing a lonely country road.
Yeah, a cornfield in Iowa, crickets chirping, maybe a lone pickup truck stalling out under the stars.
Exactly. Isolation is usually key to the phenomenon, isn't it? The middle of nowhere is where these things are supposed to happen.
That's the classic trope.
But not this time, not
No.
even close. We are in one of the most densely populated, heavily monitored cities on the entire planet. We are right in the shadow of the Brooklyn Bridge, a high-rise apartment building towering over the FDR Drive.
And the claim, the central claim here is just staggering. That a woman was floated out of her closed 12-story window, levitated hundreds of feet into the air, and then taken into a massive glowing craft.
And the kicker here isn't just the event itself, as insane as that sounds. It's who saw it, or, well, who claimed to see it.
Yes, because this wasn't just, a solo hallucination or a sleep paralysis demon in a quiet room. This event was allegedly witnessed by 23 people.
23 people. That's a crowd. That's not a witness. That's an audience.
It is, and it supposedly includes, if the stories are to be believed, some of the most powerful political figures in the world at the time. We are talking about world leaders.
So it's no surprise it's been called the abduction of the century. It's a story involving spies, diplomats, secret agents, a romance that apparently spans galaxies, X-rays.
And a lawsuit that was filed just recently against Netflix. It's a story that keeps evolving. So today, we are unpacking the Linda Napolitano case, which is also known as the Linda Cortile case.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really sift through this, because it's a massive stack of conflicting narratives, isn't it?
Oh, it's a mountain of material. I've got original investigation reports here from the early 90s, old newsletters from the skeptical community, the actual transcripts of the hypnotic regressions, and even the legal filings from late 2024.
So the goal is to figure out, is this the best evidence for alien reality we have ever seen, like some claim? Or is it a really complex psychological drama, or maybe something even stranger?
Exactly. We need to look at all the possibilities.
I have to say, looking at these sources, this feels less like a UFO report and more like a screenplay for a spy thriller. You've got the CIA, the UN, kidnappings. It's so heavy, it almost feels written.
It certainly has that cinematic quality, but, that's actually a warning sign we need to pay very close attention to. In this field, we talk about the feedback loop.
Okay, what's that?
It's where a story grows and changes over time based on the interaction between the researcher and the witness. It gets more elaborate. We need to watch for that here. Does the story get better the more it's told? Does it start to adapt to fit the cultural moment or even borrow from fiction?
A very good point. So let's start at ground zero then, the core event. Who is Linda Napolitano, and what does she say happened on that November night?
Linda Napolitano was, by all accounts, a typical housewife living in Manhattan. She was raising her children, living what seemed to be a completely normal life. Now, context here is really important. She wasn't coming into this completely cold. She had already been in contact with Budd Hopkins earlier in 1989.
Budd Hopkins. We should probably pause there for a second. For anyone who doesn't know the name, he's basically the godfather of the modern alien abduction narrative, right?
Absolutely. He was a famous artist, an abstract expressionist, very well respected, who sort of stumbled into UFO research and became its leading figure. He wrote the book Intruders, which was a massive cultural phenomenon in the 80s.
And Linda had read it.
She had. And she contacted him because she was worried about a small bump on her nose she'd had for 13 years. After reading his work, she started to think, maybe this is an implant.
Checking for implants. It seems like that was standard procedure in this field during the late 80s and 90s. Everyone was looking for that little piece of physical proof they could hold.
It was the Holy Grail. But on November 30th, things went from maybe I have a bump on my nose to a full-blown close encounter of the fourth kind.
Okay, so walk us through it. What's her story?
Correct. According to Linda's narrative, and we should be clear that this was largely recovered and detailed through hypnotic regression sessions with Hopkins, she was falling asleep around 3 a.m. Her husband was asleep right next to her in the bed.
Right.
Suddenly, she reports a physical sensation, a numbness creeping up her legs.
Then? paralysis.
Ah, the sleep paralysis element. It is so common in these stories. It's that terrifying state, between waking and sleeping where you can't move. I think almost everyone has had a touch of that at some point, and it is absolutely horrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's the most common physiological explanation for the beginning of these experiences. It creates a state of heightened fear. It can induce hallucinations. But then she says she sees them.
Small, pale, humanoid creatures, the classic grays, right there in her bedroom. And then the levitation begins. This is the part that makes this case so iconic. She claims she was floated out of her closed window. Now remember, she's 12 stories up.
12 stories. That is a terrifying height. If you look out a window from the 12th floor, the cars on the street look like little toys, and you said the window was closed.
Closed. She claims she passed right through the glass and the safety bars.
How is that even possible?
Well, it isn't, in our understanding of physics. But she specifically recalls seeing the safety bars on the window as she passed them. And she remembers thinking, I hope I don't fall.
Wow. That's such a human thought to have in a completely impossible situation. It makes it feel realer somehow.
It does. She says she's suspended in this beam of bluish-white light along with these creatures, and they're all moving toward a large reddish-orange or bright blue-white glowing craft that's just hovering over the building.
The visual of that is just stunning. A woman in a nightgown floating 12 stories above the streets of New York, bathed in this blue light. It's iconic imagery. It's almost, I don't know, religious in a way.
It is. It's very much an ascension narrative, isn't it? So she's taken inside the ship. And inside, she describes what have become the standard examination procedures. Long tables, medical instruments. It fits the pattern established by Hopkins' previous work almost perfectly.
So it's familiar territory for him.
Very. But there are some very strange details that stand out in the transcripts of the hypnosis sessions. Things that don't quite fit the standard high-tech narrative we usually hear.
Okay, let's unpack this. What kind of strange details are we talking about?
Well, for one, communication.
Yeah.
Usually in these accounts, communication is telepathic. It's highly advanced. You stare into their big black eyes and you just know what they want.
Right, the mental link.
But Linda reported speaking. She claimed she spoke in an alien language. Under hypnosis, she recalled phrases like knobby egg, hobby egg.
Knobby egg. Hobby egg. That sounds, I don't want to be rude, but it sounds almost childish, like pig Latin, or something out of a Dr. Seuss book.
It does, doesn't it? It's a very odd detail. And critics, of course, point to this and say, this doesn't sound like a complex extraterrestrial language. This sounds like word association. It sounds like something this subconscious mind just throws up when it's trying to improvise under pressure.
That makes sense.
She also describes a nasal probe, a medical instrument being forced into her nostril.
Ouch. And that brings us right back to the nose issue, the implant bump she originally contacted Hopkins about.
Exactly. It circles right back to her initial fear. It reinforces the original concern. But eventually the experience ends and she's returned. She says she wakes up in her bed with a thud or a roar. And her immediate reaction is just panic, not just for herself, but for her family.
Right, and this is where I read about the mirror test. This part of the story actually gave me chills because it feels so grounded. It's not about aliens at this moment, it's about a mother.
Yeah. Yes. She rushes to check on her children, and she finds them sleeping so deeply, so unnaturally still, that they appear to be dead.
Terrifying.
She's so panicked that she actually grabs a mirror and holds it under her son's nose to check for his breath, to see if it fogs up.
That is such a specific, visceral detail. It feels real. If you were in a state of pure panic, you wouldn't just calmly check a pulse. You'd do whatever desperate, old-fashioned thing you could think of to see if they were alive. It really anchors the story in a raw, human emotion.
It adds a layer of absolute fear to the narrative. And of course, she contacts Budd Hopkins immediately. But at this point, it's still a single witness case. It's dramatic, sure, but it's just Linda's word against reality. It's one woman's story.
But that's where this case earns its reputation, isn't it? It doesn't stay a single witness case for long. This is where it goes completely off the rails.
No, it doesn't. About 15 months after the event, in February of 1991, the story just explodes. Budd Hopkins receives a letter.
And enter the characters known as Richard and Dan.
Precisely. The letter is signed by two men who claim to be police officers. They claim they were in a patrol car under the FDR Drive, which, for those who don't know, is a major roadway running right along the East River on the night of the abduction.
And they saw it from the street level.
They claim they saw everything. They described the building, the specific window, and they described seeing, in their words, a darling little lady in a white nightgown floating up into a UFO.
darling little lady. That's an interesting choice of words for New York City police officers in the early 90s. It sounds a bit antiquated, or maybe even literary.
It stands out for sure. It doesn't sound like the typical vernacular of an NYPD beat cop in 1991. But here's a crucial detail in their initial letter that often gets overlooked in retellings. They claim the UFO didn't just fly away into space.
What did it do?
They claimed it plunged into the East River, right near the Brooklyn Bridge, and never came back up.
Into the water. So we're talking about a trans-medium vehicle now, something that can operate in both air and sea. A USO, an unidentified submerged object.
Exactly. A huge wrinkle in the story. So Hopkins, as you can imagine, is ecstatic. He thinks he has independent, verifiable corroboration from law enforcement. He tries to find these police officers at local precincts. He calls around, checks rosters.
Let me guess, they don't exist?
Not a trace. No police officers named Richard or Dan matched the description or were on duty in that area. And when they write back to him later, the story shifts. They admit they aren't cops.
Oh, so what are they now?
They claim they are actually bodyguards, covert agents, possibly CIA or Secret Service, and they were assigned to protect a VIP.
The plot thickens, so they were lying about being cops to protect their cover. That's convenient, but also, I suppose, plausible in a spy logic kind of way. If you're CIA, you don't sign your name CIA agent.
That's the claim. And this is when they introduce a third witness, the third man, the VIP they were driving that night.
And this isn't just any VIP. We're not talking about a CEO or a minor celebrity here. We're talking about a world leader.
It is alleged to be Javier Pérez de Cuellar, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations at the time.
The head of the UN, witnessing an alien abduction in New York City. I mean, if this is true, this changes human history instantly. Why wasn't this on the front page of the New York Times the next day? UN chief sees UFO abduct housewife. It's the biggest story ever.
The claim is that they were driving into a heliport at 3 a.m. Their car allegedly stalled, the classic UFO effect, where electronics fail in the presence of the craft, and all three men sat there and watched this woman float out of the window and into the ship.
And supposedly the Secretary General was hysterical.
Understandably so, if it happened. He was reportedly deeply, deeply shaken by the experience. But the witness list doesn't even stop there. Later in 1991, another witness emerges, a woman known as Janet Kimball.
The woman on the bridge.
Right. She writes a letter to Hopkins claiming her car stalled on the Brooklyn Bridge itself. She says the lights went out, the engine just died, and from her vantage point, she saw the woman floating into the craft.
So now we have the abductee, the two mystery agents, the head of the United Nations, and an independent woman on the bridge. It sounds like a slam dunk case. It sounds like proof. How do you argue with that many eyes on the target?
On the surface, yes, it seems completely airtight. But here is where we have to start applying that critical lens we talked about earlier. There is a massive contradiction right here in the core witness accounts. Remember what Richard and Dan said the UFO did.
They said it plunged into the East River. It went down.
Right. But Janet Kimball, the woman on the bridge, she reported seeing the UFO fly up and away, disappearing into the night sky.
Wait a minute. One set of witnesses says it went down into the river. The other says it went up into the sky. That's not a small detail. That's a completely different trajectory. It's the opposite.
It's a fundamental, irreconcilable discrepancy. It's like one witness saying the getaway car turned left and the other saying it turned right. They can't both be correct. And yet the investigation proceeded as if these accounts corroborated each other perfectly.
How does that happen?
I think Hopkins was so focused on the fact that they all saw something, a woman, a craft, that the conflicting details of what happened next were sort of smoothed over or ignored.
Okay, so we have conflicting flight paths, which is a big problem. But the story gets even weirder from here, doesn't it? It stops being just about aliens and starts turning into, well, a kidnapping drama. This is where I started to get really confused reading the notes. It feels like the genre shifted halfway through the movie.
This brings us squarely into the high strangeness aspect of the case. And this is where this story takes a very, very dark turn. Linda starts claiming that Richard and Dan, these supposed agents who witnessed her abduction, start stalking her.
Why? Because they want to de-bloof her. Because she knows too much. Is it a national security thing?
It's far more aggressive and bizarre than that. Linda claims they kidnapped her. Multiple times. They pull her off the street, throw her into a car, they interrogate her. They want to know if she works for the government or if she's an alien.
If she is an alien, they watched her get abducted, so now they think she might be one of them. That's a strange leap in logic.
It is. And it leads to a very bizarre incident that has become known as the no-toes incident.
I saw this in the outline. Please, you have to explain no toes. It sounds completely ridiculous.
It is. In one of these alleged kidnappings, Dan, one of the agents, the more unstable one, forces Linda to take off her shoes and socks. He is apparently convinced that aliens do not have toes.
What?
Yes. He believes aliens are toeless. So when he sees that she does, in fact, have toes, he's apparently relieved.
That sounds unhinged. If these are elite CIA or Secret Service agents, checking a woman's feet for toes seems like a very strange intelligence protocol. Is there any basis for aliens don't have toes anywhere in the UFO literature? Or is Dan just making this up on the spot?
Not really. It seems to be a specific, bizarre fixation of this character, Dan. It suggests a level of mental instability that becomes a running theme for these agents. They aren't the cool, collected men in black we imagine. They are emotional, erratic, and seemingly obsessed with Linda.
Which leads us to the beach house incident.
The beach house incident in October 1991. This is where the story goes from a spy thriller to a psychological horror film.
This is the one that reads like a romance novel gone terribly wrong.
Dan allegedly kidnaps Linda again. He takes her to a beach house out on Long Island, and he forces her to put on the same white nightgown she was wearing during the abduction.
That is incredibly creepy. That's moving way away from national security and deep into personal obsession. It feels fetishistic.
It is. But then the story gets even stranger. Richard and the third man, Perez de Cuellar, apparently show up. Or rather, it is revealed through a kind of shared, recovered memory that they were all involved in something else that night.
What do you mean?
It turns out, according to this new, evolving narrative, that all of them, the agents, the UN Secretary General, and Linda, were also abducted together that night on the beach.
Wait, so the witnesses were abductees too. It's not just that they saw her get taken from her apartment, it's that they were with her on a spaceship later on.
That became the new narrative, yes. They all recall being on a beach with Linda and the aliens. And in this shared memory, Linda was digging in the sand. At one point, she holds up a dead fish to the men and says, "Look what you have done."
Look what you have done, like an ecological warning, like humanity is killing the oceans.
Exactly. It fits that environmental message that is often found in abduction lore from that era. The idea that the aliens are here because they are concerned about how we are destroying the planet. And the aliens, in this memory, refer to Linda by a special title. They call her the Lady of the Sands.
Lady of the Sands, you cannot make this stuff up. Or, well, I guess maybe you can. It sounds so lyrical. It sounds like a title from a fantasy novel, not an intelligence report.
We'll get to the making up part.
Yeah.
But the drama at the beach house escalates even further. Dan, the unstable agent, has a complete breakdown. He tries to drown Linda in the ocean.
He tries to kill her.
Yes. He's hysterical, screaming. And Richard, who is positioned as the good cop in this scenario, rushes in and saves her.
This is full-on soap opera territory now. There's no other way to describe it.
Oh.
And speaking of soap operas, we have to talk about the romance subplot. Because apparently alien abduction isn't enough. We need a star-crossed love story.
The baby Anne and Mickey story. This is where it gets really convoluted. Richard reveals to Linda that he has actually loved her since they were children.
How is that possible?
He claims that they were both abducted repeatedly as children. He calls her by a childhood nickname, Baby Ann, and she calls him Mickey. He believes they bonded aboard UFOs their entire lives, orchestrated by the aliens.
That is, wow. So it's fate. It's an alien-arranged relationship.
In his mind, yes. And it goes even further. He believes one of her children actually the result of alien-orchestrated unions on board the ships.
Okay. We have gone from a UFO sighting over the Brooklyn Bridge to a multi-generational, alien-sponsored romance involving secret agents and attempted murder. It's a lot. Is there any actual physical evidence for any of this? Because right now we are deep in story territory. We have titles, we have secret loves, we have dead fish. Where's the beef?
That brings us to the very shaky ground of the evidence. Linda did provide one piece of what seemed like hard evidence, an X-ray.
The nasal implant, the thing that started it all.
Right. She showed an X-ray to Budd Hopkins that appeared to show a small, curly-Q metallic object lodged in her nasal cavity.
That sounds compelling. That's hard evidence. If you have an X-ray of a foreign object that shouldn't be there, that's data. You can analyze that.
It would be, if it could ever be verified. But shortly after this X-ray was taken, Linda claimed she had a massive nosebleed one day, and the object just vanished. It came out.
Convenient. It just fell out.
Yeah.
And they couldn't find it.
That's the claim. It was gone. And the doctor who supposedly took the X-ray, He was described by Hopkins as being nervous and was never formally interviewed or verified by the investigators in a way that satisfied any of the skeptics. The X-ray itself was never authenticated by the radiologist of record. So what we're left with is essentially a photocopy of a claim. We don't have the original film, we don't have the object, and we don't have the doctor on record.
So it's an anecdote with a picture. What about the sand from the beach house?
Ah yes, the sand. After the alleged kidnapping at the beach house, Linda apparently arrived at Budd Hopkins' house. And she had wet hair and sand in her hair.
Well, that proves she's at a beach. But it doesn't prove she was flown there by a deranged CIA agent who was with the UN Secretary General, does it?
Precisely. It proves she had sand in her hair. She lives in New York City. She could have driven to Jones Beach herself. She could have taken the subway to Coney Island. The source of the sand is entirely dependent on her testimony. There's no chain of custody.
So Budd Hopkins, a very respected, very intelligent researcher, he bought all of this, the Lady of the Sands, the romance, all of it. Why didn't he see these giant red flags?
He did believe it. He wrote a whole book about it, Witnessed. He felt the corroboration from Richard and Dan was impossible to fake because they knew details that he thought only Linda could possibly know. He thought, how could these strangers know what happened in her bedroom unless they were actually there and saw it?
But there's a massive logical flaw in that thinking, isn't there?
A massive one. Linda was the conduit for almost all of the information. She was the one who met Richard and Dan. Hopkins never met them face-to-face during the crucial period of the investigation. He communicated with them through letters that Linda often delivered herself or that arrived mysteriously, and through phone calls where, voices can be disguised.
So if Linda is the source of the original story, and Linda is also the one providing the corroborating information from the supposed witnesses, we just have a closed loop. It's an echo chamber.
We do, and that leads us directly to the skeptics. Because while Hopkins was calling this the case of the century, other, more critical investigators were looking at the gaping holes in the story. Specifically, a report by a trio of investigators, Stifela, Butler, and Hansen.
Right. Let's talk about these guys. They did the basic legwork that Hopkins apparently didn't. What did they find when they looked at the simple logistics of that night? Because the devil is always in the details.
Let's start with the weather. Hopkins admitted he never even checked the weather for November 30th, 1989, but these investigators did. And the visibility was clear, which is actually a point against the story.
How so?
Because if the sky was clear over Manhattan and a giant, brightly lit object was hovering over a high-rise and then plunging into the river, more people would have seen it. We are talking about the Brooklyn Bridge and the FDR Drive.
Even at 3 a.m., New York City never truly sleeps. It's not empty. There are cab drivers, street cleaners, people working late.
Exactly. And the location where Richard and Dan said they were parked under the FDR Drive was directly opposite the New York Post loading dock.
And a newspaper loading dock at 3:00 a.m. is basically rush hour. That's when the morning edition goes out on the trucks. You've got trucks, drivers, noise, people milling about.
It's arguably the busiest time of day for that specific building. The investigators talked to the manager of the dock, who confirmed it would have been buzzing with activity. And yet, not a single worker reported seeing a massive UFO with bright blue and orange lights plunging into the river just a block away.
That's damning. If a UFO crashed into the East River, someone loading a truck at the Post would have seen it. It would have been the headline in their own paper. Martians crash near Post.
You'd think so.
What about the heliport they were supposedly driving the Secretary General to?
The downtown heliport. The investigators checked the logs. It was closed. It closed hours earlier. There were no flights scheduled and absolutely no records of a VIP flight for the Secretary General at that hour.
So the entire premise of their journey, the destination, was a fabrication. Why were they even driving him there?
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense. And the security protocols for a figure like that. You can't just drive the head of the UN around in a single car that conveniently stalls without any backup.
Right. We're talking about a major diplomat who is a potential target for any number of groups.
We actually consulted with some security professionals for this deep dive, and they were very clear. A motorcade for a target as high value as the UN Secretary General doesn't just travel with one car. They have lead cars, chase cars, multiple layers of security. If a car stalls, there's an immediate massive radio alert. Backup teams would swarm the area within minutes. The NYPD would be notified. It wouldn't just be three guys sitting there quietly watching a UFO for 20 minutes.
It seems like the entire story falls apart the moment you apply real-world logic to it. It relies on movie logic, not security logic. But there is one final piece of evidence the skeptics found that I think is the real nail in the coffin: the book.
Ah, yes, the novel Night Eyes.
Tell us about Night Eyes, because this seems like the potential smoking gun.
Night Eyes is a science fiction novel written by Garfield Reeves Stevens. It was published in April of 1989.
April 1989, that's what, 7 months before Linda's alleged abduction in November?
Correct. It was on paperback stands for months leading up to the event. And when you read the plot synopsis of Night Eyes, the parallels to the Linda Napolitano case are,
Well,
they're startling. It's uncanny.
okay, give me the list. How close are we talking here?
In the book, a woman is abducted from a high-rise apartment in New York City.
Check.
The abduction is witnessed by government agents who are on a stakeout in a van or car nearby.
Check.
The agents later kidnap the woman themselves to interrogate her. They take her to a safe house on a beach.
A beach house. Check.
A romance develops between one of the agents and the abductee. They discover they share a deep, pre-existing connection.
Wow. Check.
And the entire plot revolves around an alien government conspiracy involving tracking implants and a shared history between the agent and the woman.
It's the same story. It's the same script. The high-rise, the agents watching, the kidnapping to a beach house, the romance. Even the basic premise is identical.
The similarities are so numerous and so specific that it becomes very, very difficult to dismiss it all as just coincidence. The implication from the skeptics is clear. The story elements were listed, consciously or subconsciously, directly from this paperback novel.
So what does this all mean? We have a story that seems to rip off a sci-fi novel, that defies police and security protocols, and relies on invisible witnesses who tell contradictory stories. Why did it happen? What are the main theories for what was really going on?
Well, broadly, we have three main theories to explore here. Theory A is the most straightforward. It was a hoax or a fantasy.
Linda just made it all up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perhaps seeking attention, or perhaps seeking to validate Budd Hopkins' theories and become a star subject in his research. Remember, she contacted him before the abduction. She already wanted to be part of that world. The handwriting analysis that was mentioned in some of the source material even suggested that Janet Kimball's writing, the woman on the bridge, was a match for Linda's own handwriting.
That's a huge red flag if she wrote the witness letters herself.
Then the entire house of cards collapses. The independent corroboration vanishes, and it becomes a performance piece created and sustained by one person.
But there's a darker, more complex theory. Theory B, disinformation. A Psy-Op.
Right. The Psy-Op theory. Some researchers, like Philip Cobbins, have pointed out that this all happened during a very specific political window.
The election for the next UN Secretary General?
Exactly. The theory goes that perhaps intelligence agencies, the CIA, MI6, wanted to smear Boutros Ghali, who was the Egyptian candidate, by destabilizing his rival or the current office holder, Perez de Cuellar.
How does a UFO story do that? How is that a political weapon?
If you can paint a world leader or someone in their orbit as unstable or obsessed with little green men, you destroy their credibility on the world stage. The theory suggests that maybe Richard and Dan were real agents, but they weren't witnessing an abduction. They were creating one, manipulating both Linda and Hopkins to craft a scandalous story that would eventually leak and ruin a reputation.
So Hopkins becomes an unwitting pawn in a global spy game. He thinks he's finding aliens, but he's actually being used as a tool for a political smear campaign.
It's a compelling, if conspiratorial theory. It would explain why agents were involved, but acting so strangely and illogically. They weren't investigating. They were feeding a narrative, pushing buttons to make the story more and more outlandish.
And then there's Theory C, which is more psychological, the Dungeons and Dragons effect.
This is a fascinating perspective. The idea is that the researchers themselves, Hopkins and his inner circle, became players in a kind of live-action role-playing game. They stopped checking reality. They ignored the weather reports. They didn't question the security protocols. They got so swept up in the fantasy and the excitement of the case of the century that they suspended their disbelief.
They wanted it to be true so badly that they ignored all the signs that they were just playing a game.
Exactly. It became a collaborative storytelling exercise where everyone involved, Linda, Hopkins, maybe even the agents if they existed, reinforced everyone else's delusions to keep the game going.
This all brings us to today. You'd think a story from 1989 would have faded away by now, but it hasn't. It is right back in the news.
It is, very much so. In 2024, Netflix released a documentary series called The Manhattan Alien Abduction.
And it's not exactly a flattering portrayal of the case, from what I gather.
No, not at all. It features Carol Rainey, very heavily.
And Carol Rainey was Budd Hopkins' wife at the time.
She was. And she was his co-author on the book Witnessed, which detailed this case. She provides a skeptical insider's view. She claims she watched, firsthand, as Hopkins lost his objectivity. She describes how he would co-create the narrative with Linda during the hypnosis sessions, asking leading questions, suggesting details.
So she was in the room where it happened, and she's saying it wasn't what it seemed.
She was. And her testimony in the documentary is absolutely devastating to the credibility of the case. She essentially argues that Hopkins was manipulated or allowed himself to be manipulated because he wanted this to be the big story that proved his life's work. She describes a man who was just too close to the subject to see the truth clearly.
And Linda Napolitano did not take this documentary lying down.
No, she did not. In November of 2024, just a few months ago, Linda Napolitano, along with the estate of Budd Hopkins, filed a lawsuit against Netflix.
Suing them for what?
Fraud, defamation, and breach of contract. Linda claims she was completely set up. She says the producers deceived her about the project's tone. She maintains her story is 100% true and that the documentary was maliciously edited to make her look like a villain and a fraud.
It's just a messy, tragic ending to an already messy story. We have a woman who claims she was abducted by aliens, now fighting a legal battle against a global streaming giant, while the legacy of the most famous UFO researcher in modern history hangs in the balance.
It really highlights the human cost of these incredible stories. Whether it's a hoax, a delusion, a Psy-Op, or a real event, the fallout destroys reputations and lives. At the end of the day, it's not just a story, it's people's lives that are caught in the gears.
So we've unpacked the narrative, the supposed witnesses, the kidnapping drama, the skeptical takedown, and now the courtroom battle. It's a lot to process.
It really is. It's one of the most complex and layered cases in the entire history of the subject.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me, the central question that remains. If Linda made it all up,
Yeah.
how did she do it? How did one housewife from Manhattan manage to fool a world-renowned intelligent researcher for decades and create this elaborate cast of characters?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was she some kind of mastermind manipulator, a brilliant storyteller? Or was Budd Hopkins just that willing to believe that he ignored all the signs?
And then there's the alternative.
The alternative is, in some ways, even more terrifying. If even a tiny part of this is true, if a craft really did hover over the Brooklyn Bridge, if the UN Secretary General really did see something that night, why is the only evidence so weird? Why does the story that surrounds it look like a B-movie? Why is it filled with romance novel plots and characters checking for toes?
Is it possible that the phenomenon itself mimics our culture? That it presents itself in a way that looks like a sci-fi movie because that's the language we expect to see?
That's the feedback loop on a cosmic scale. Maybe the phenomenon gives us exactly what we're looking for. Or maybe it deliberately hides behind the absurd, cloaking itself in ridiculousness so that we're forced to dismiss it. But in the end, for this case, we are left with a stack of letters from ghosts. Richard and Dan, who may or may not exist. A third man who never spoke on the record. And a woman who, to this day, stands by her story, even in a court of law.
So the final question for our listeners is this. Is this the greatest evidence of contact ever recorded? Or is it the greatest evidence of how much we want to believe?
And I think that answer depends entirely on who you ask and maybe what you had for dinner. It's a tough one.
Well, that is quite the journey. From the East River to the courtroom, this case has it all. We want to thank you for joining us on this very, very deep dive.
It's always a pleasure to explore the impossible with you.
Keep looking up, everyone. You never know who might be looking back.
Or who might be watching from the car parked down the street.